Hello, it is April the 17th, 2025. It is the eve of Superman Day. On today's DCU Daily, is James Gunn a co-CEO of a studio or a writer-director? Because in my opinion, he cannot be both. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. You can follow me on X, Twitter, at Movies TV Mad, and on Instagram and on threads that nobody goes to for anybody at Movies TV Mad. X on TikTok, Mad Mickey's World, and on Snapchat, BMouth60 Mick, your host with the most. A very warm welcome to Thursday's edition of the DCU Daily on the eve of Superman Day. I'm just excited for Superman Day because there will be some tidbits from DC Studios and DC Comics. We'll be all celebrating my favourite character in fiction. And here on Movies TV Mad, we will be no different. He's my hero. He's my favourite fictional character. We're going all in on Superman Day. But on the eve of Superman Day, we must ask a very serious question of James Gunn. Is he a co-CEO of a studio or a writer-director? Because as I said, he cannot be both. Why? Because a CEO of a studio must make ruthless, anti-creative decisions. What to cut, what to inject in a movie, they have to make business decisions. And the business decision for this Superman film from the very beginning was that it must be like Superman 78. It must be bright, fun, inspiring, hopeful, in their opinion, everything that Man of Steel isn't. Now, as I've said before, Man of Steel is the most successful solo Superman movie of all time, and that's a fact. Forget about, adjusting for inflation. We're in the present day, forget about inflation. It's the most successful solo Superman movie. As Nerdrotic said on the Nerdrotic Daily, imagine the Snyder Bros if James Gunn's Superman film doesn't make anywhere near Man of Steel. But I'm not here to talk about potential box offices or anything like that. If this film fails, there will be a huge autopsy and many questions will be asked of Warner Brothers Discovery, Zaslav's decision-making, James Gunn's decision-making, and the top question at the autopsy table will be, how can you be a CEO of a studio and a writer-director? Because it doesn't work, does it? Because you do have to make anti-creative decisions. You have to decide that something may have to go from the movie. We've heard rumours that the studio, not Gunn, maybe have decided to cut 20 minutes from this film, make it 2 hours, maybe even just under 2 hours, which I think would be utterly problematic. By the way, I don't know if this is true or false. So I don't believe that Gunn can run a successful DCU, right? Make a successful Superman movie while being a co-CEO of a studio. I don't understand how that works, right? Let me give you a scenario, right? I make a clay model. But I'm also the co-CEO of the museum it's going to go at. How do I make that decision? Do I go, well, I made it. I'm the boss. I'm the big fish pissing in this pond. I can do whatever I want. It's a shit clay model, but I'm in charge. I can have whatever I want at my museum. This is the situation, right? Creature Commandos was given a second series because James Gunn is the co-CEO of DC Studios. It doesn't compute. Now let's look at Kevin Feige at Marvel Studios. He is the president of Marvel Studios. He's also the head showrunner, if you like, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So basically he'll bring in a director, he'll tell them what to do, what kind of tone he wants the movie. Basically he's driving the story of the films and the streaming shows. Now, James Gunn is also a showrunner of the DCU. He's in charge of the storytelling and the art and the type of tones and the type of movies and streaming shows they're going to do. But there's a huge difference. Over at DC Studios, which isn't really even a studio, it's a logo masquerading as a studio, as we've discussed on this very platform and all my other platforms before. So there's a big difference. Gunn isn't the only one making the decisions, because you've got Zaslav and you've got Peter Safran also interfering with the creative process. So I don't really understand how James Gunn can be the creative behind the DCU and be making this Superman movie while having to make CEO decisions on this Superman movie. You cannot do both, everyone. This is a very messy situation. I don't know about you. Get in the comments if you're here on YouTube, right? Get in the comments and tell me, have you ever heard of a writer-director who's also a co-CEO or CEO of a studio? Right. Don't throw Nolan at me or the big directors who have their own production companies. A production company is very different to a studio. He is the co-CEO of a studio, and he's writing and directing a Superman movie for said studio. So, who's making the decisions? What gets cut? What type of... It doesn't... Look, I'm sorry. It just doesn't make sense to me how this works, right? Man of Steel was a bona fide movie made by two independent filmmakers in Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder, with David Goyer leading the narrative of the film, because Man of Steel was David S. Goyer's brainchild, right? So it was his idea, it was his story. Nolan co-wrote the story with him, watched over him to make sure he didn't take the PISS too much, right? Creatively. But it was three people making a movie. It wasn't a movie made by a committee. WB, the committee, tried to interfere with this movie. They had Jeff Johns at the door trying to get the door. They had a bunch of crazy people trying to interfere with this movie, as they did with Superman Returns. They deleted the Return to Krypton sequence, which was a huge effing mistake. I keep on begging the studio to give us a director's cut, because Singer can't do it. He's hiding away in Israel. He's been disgraced, right? Someone at that studio should add back that Return to Krypton sequence. You'd make money. But I know that New Hollywood are averse to making money these days. So that's the thing as well. They don't really understand how to make films, and they don't understand how to make money. They don't seem to want to make money anymore. But I just don't get how James Gunn can be the co-CEO of DC Studios and unbiasedly write and direct a Superman movie. I don't understand how it works. Who's in charge of what? Gunn hasn't explained that. Now, one of the things he said, that me and Peter get to make the decisions. We are the committee. We are the studio, so it's better because we get to decide what happens and what doesn't. But what if Safran doesn't agree with something Gunn's doing? Gunn is the co-CEO of DC Studios. He has equal say on what happens and what doesn't. But if they don't agree, who gets the final vote? I bet you $1 trillion it's Peter Safran. There lies the problem. Because Gunn could have been in charge of the DCU, right? He could have been the showrunner without being a co-CEO of the studio. Because it's interesting, because Kevin Feige is, the chairman of Marvel Studios or whatever you call it, a similar position, right? But he's not a writer-director. That's the difference. Gunn said he wants to write and direct as many projects, within the DCU as possible. He wants to handpick what he does, right? I bet you it came to a relief to him to get away from the Superman set when he was running off over the weekends while he was making Superman and starting to shoot Peacemaker 2. Because that's his bag. That's where he's at home. Little project with a little character from DC Comics, perfect for him. But you're not that guy anymore, James. You are the co-CEO of DC Studios. You can't be the little director who does little projects anymore. But you get to make some very huge decisions on the future of DC live action. Like the way you decided, let's be honest, that Superman and Lois would end with a Series 4. You're the one who said no to the Smallville animated series. These are huge decisions that cost, forget DC Studios, it's not a real studio, but will cost Warner Brothers Discovery big money. You also didn't want to make Constantine 2. You didn't want them to make Constantine 2, but they went above your head, and now it's happening because Zaslav maybe can see, but just maybe, just in case Superman's a flop and a disaster, that they start on the road to making individual standalone DC movies. Maybe. But I don't understand how you can be a co-CEO of a company and be a creative as well. You can't do both. You need one person to be the creative, and you need the other person to make the ruthless studio decisions. Now, partially that's Saffron, but Gunn is the co-CEO. He has just as much right to make these decisions as well. So you're making a decision as a creative, because you're a creative. You want to do something. But then you have to put your other head on. You have to put your studio head on. How, boys and girls, does that work? The answer is, it doesn't work. And the reality is, all Gunn should have been doing here is being the creative lead of the DCU. Not in charge of DC totally. Totally wrong decision. I don't think Saffron should be the other co-head of DC Studios. He was involved, his production company was involved with the DCEU movies that flopped. Yes, he was also involved with Aquaman that made over $1 billion. I agree. But mostly the films that he was involved with didn't make a lot of green, if any. So tell me, what qualified him in Zaslav's mind, Peter Saffron, to be, the business brains behind DC Studios? Again, you're going to have to quantify this for me and tell me how this works. I mean, you look at, let's just say Gunn and Saffron are the ones making all the decisions. Let's just say DC Studios is actually an independent real studio from WB, which I don't believe for a minute it is. Who's decided on the marketing and the way it's being marketed? They've decided to market this movie the same as WB marketed Barbie. This means it's not DC Studios, it's not Gunn or Saffron or anyone at that logo making the decisions. It's Warner Brothers Discovery, because they're the ones who decided to promote Barbie as they did. Nothing to do with anyone at DC Studios. And here's the problem. You cannot market a Superman film in the same way you market a Barbie movie. It's just not going to work. What are they waiting for? Now, tomorrow, which is Superman Day, is going to be very, very interesting, because even though Gunn's kind of made it clear there's no trailer unless he lied to give us a big surprise tomorrow, who knows? Anything can happen. Don't be surprised if we get a short clip from the movie. I think that certainly has a potential of happening. And the clip I think they're going to choose is the interview between Superman and Lois Lane. He's Clark, but he's pretending to be Superman at the same time, whatever it is, right? That's a long, drawn out, dialogue-heavy scene, 10 minutes. Will they cut that? Right, if this is a dialogue-heavy movie and it's another Superman Returns with not much action, Houston, we've got a huge problem, and I've discussed why that would be a mistake. But don't be surprised if they show at the very least, a clip tomorrow. It would be absolutely pathetic if we got the trailer 2 or 3 days or a week later. That means it's pretty much ready. And they could show it tomorrow. It's Superman Day. To get hype for this movie on a day where people are celebrating their hero's birthday, celebrating when he first launched in comics. That's very, very important. The reality is we have not seen enough from this movie, because this isn't 1978. You cannot promote it like they did back then. You can't have 1 or 2 TV spots and 1 main trailer. That's what they did. You taught the public to get used to lots of trailers, free main trailers, a teaser, and a bunch of TV spots. So once you've put the sugar drip in someone, the adrenaline drip in someone, what's going to happen when you take it out? There's going to be a problem. Imagine all of a sudden if the internet was banned and we couldn't use it. Because we're like addicts, aren't we? We're like drug addicts when it comes to social media. What would happen? I mean, if one of these social media platforms break down, all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? That's what we're like. We're pathetic, aren't we? But this is the thing. You can't change the marketing strategy all of a sudden. Faye also said this, that they're looking to only have one, maybe two trailers. But the public are going to say that your marketing strategy is crap. So I'm looking forward to Superman Day. After all that, everything said and done, we may actually get a full trailer tomorrow. Who knows?